If you've been searching for an RTS game to look forward to, you're in luck because in this video we'll be talking about Tempest Rising. I know we don't cover RTSs a lot on this channel, but I do really love this genre, one that's kind of gone by the wayside in recent gaming years. Tempest Rising is an upcoming real-time RTS game developed by Slipgate Ironworks and 2B Games that aims to refresh the genre with a modern twist while paying homage to the classics like Command & Conquer. And when you see the gameplay footage of the game, it really does remind you of Command & Conquer. Tempest Rising is set in a post-World War III dystopia, and the story unfolds around the mysterious Tempest resource, which is a vibrant organic material, which is a big part of the game's lore and gameplay. Players can choose between two distinct factions, the Global Defense Force, the GDF, a disciplined military coalition, and the Tempest Dynasty, the DYN, a resourceful rebel force harnessing the chaotic properties of Tempest. There are only two factions at the moment, but a third one is rumored to have ties to the Tempest's origins, and is supposedly set to be introduced after the game's release. Tempest Rising was rumored to be set to release in 2024, but seeing as there's only a month left, it's probably not going to happen. Maybe we'll get it in early 2025 instead, but there are tons of games coming out in this period, so I would prefer if it came out in at least Q2 of next year. The game will be released on PC via Steam and Epic Games stores with no current plans for console platforms. A closed beta testing phase recently provided select players with early access to check out gameplay mechanics and gather feedback, but unfortunately the closed beta period has ended, so you'll probably have to wait for the full release to be able to play the game. Not to worry though, because while you're waiting, we'll be talking about everything you should know about the game. Tempest Rising throws players into an alternate history where the world has been pretty much wrecked by mysterious Tempest vines. These vines are crazy organic growths that are somehow super valuable. And coincidentally, the game is also set during a modern-day World War III after the Cuban Missile Crisis left some parts of the Earth irradiated. The story explores the themes of survival, ambition, and what happens when power goes unchecked. As you work through the campaigns, you'll start to uncover where these Tempest vines came from, with hints of a bigger mystery underneath. It all sounds really vague, I know, but it's all we have at the moment without getting into too much spoilers. There's even talk of a third faction called the Veti who are supposedly super shady and tied to the Tempest in ways no one really gets yet. Are the vines alien, something from Earth, or something else entirely? Either way, the game has decided that controlling the Tempest could literally decide humanity's future. From what we've seen of Tempest Rising in gameplay footage, players start off by picking a Doctrine and Armory loadout, which seem to play a big role in shaping how missions are tackled. Doctrines appear to grant bonuses like faster resource gathering or stealth enhancements, while the Armory lets you bring specific upgrades or units into play. Since you only have a limited number of slots, it looks like there's a lot of things to consider when it comes to finding the right balance between power and versatility. This could make experimenting with different setups a fun way to keep each mission fresh, even if you've already played it. After setting up your loadup, you jump straight into the action, and from what we've seen, the gameplay looks like it's trying to capture that old-school vibe of Red Alert or Command & Conquer, but with some modern tweaks. Something that caught my eye immediately was the Technicians. They're versatile units you can create to handle stuff like repairing vehicles, disarming mines, and capturing buildings. On top of that, they also have an additional faction-specific purpose. It feels like they're going to be more important than your standard infantry. The early missions, at least from the gameplay footage, seem to ease you into the game with objectives like retaking a construction yard and whatnot to give you a chance to get familiar with the mechanics and these units that were featured. The Tempest resource looks like it's one of the more unique mechanics in the game. It's this organic material that ties into both your economy and combat, and from what we've seen, you can either grab unripe pods for a quick boost or wait for them to mature for a bigger payoff. And the Tempests do more than just act like some sort of energy source. Their fields also affect your gameplay. There's this mechanic where mechanical units passing through Tempest fields build up a charge that slows them down, but some units seem to actually get stronger from it, which is pretty cool. It really does look like Tempests are the game's take on Tiberium, since even the fields where you harvest them affect your units in some kind of way, just like in Command & Conquer. It also feels like it adds an extra layer of strategy where you'll have to think about when and where to harvest or engage in fights, and that could make for some interesting decisions during gameplay. The factions seem to have their own unique approaches as well, which is pretty interesting. The GDF feels more traditional with straightforward, powerful units and classic military tactics, while the Tempest Dynasty, on the other hand, seems all about adaptability with mobile refineries and units that can use Tempest Charge for boosts. The third faction, the Veti, are still mostly a mystery, but since they're tied to the Tempest resource, it sounds like they'll have some cool, unique mechanics as well. There's also a progression system with requisition points and doctrines that might let you customize your forces as you go, which could add some nice variety to the game. Resource management also seems to be different depending on the faction. The GDF apparently collects intel through combat and spends it on upgrades, which could push you to stay aggressive. The Dynasty's power plants, though, seem to have this mode switching thing, where they're either producing resources or boosting nearby structures. It kind of does make each faction pretty distinct and open up different strategies to try out. Another interesting mechanic is the overcharge ability. Apparently, it lets you speed up production at the cost of damaging your base. It's risky, but it might be worth it in tight situations where you need units fast. The way units interact also looks pretty dynamic, with counterplay options like GDF Hunter tanks being effective against Tempest Dynasty flame tanks. From what we've been shown, it seems like there's a lot of thought that can go into managing your army composition and tackling side objectives, which might reward you with extra abilities or upgrades. Base building feels like it's taking a different spin compared to standard RTS games. For example, the GDF builds its structures in stages, leaving them vulnerable during construction. That seems to add an interesting layer to expanding your base, especially with how crucial power management looks. If your power runs low, production slows down, and things like turrets reportedly stop working. You can turn off certain buildings to save power, but that sounds like a risky move as well, since it can make things even more challenging depending on what you have to shut down. The game's depth seems to come from a bunch of small, impactful mechanics like the terrain affecting combat, units with special stances, and even the option to capture enemy blueprints and unlock new units. Planning defenses like turrets and walls will probably need some extra thought though, since they're fragile while under construction. On top of that, unique units like the GDF's Riot Van and the Dynasty's Porcupine MLRS add some sort of variety, since they're mostly only used for very specific situations. As for multiplayer, it looks like ranked matches and custom games are on the horizon, which could really boost replayability. If you've ever played an RTS, you know that multiplayer is a big part of these games. The third faction, the Veti, are still under wraps, but there's definitely some intrigue about how they'll work and what role the Tempest resources play in a bigger picture. While we haven't gotten hands-on with it yet, Tempest Rising seems like it could hit the sweet spot for RTS fans, mixing classic elements with some fresh twists. The creation of Tempest Rising began in 2019, driven by game director Fred and the team at 3D Realms with a vision to honor RTS classics like Command & Conquer, while also introducing fresh new mechanics. Rather than simply mimicking what worked in the past, they've focused on innovating gameplay such as giving each faction its own resource system, adding a strategic layer and unique approaches to missions. After over 3 years of development, they've crafted a game that promises a robust single-player experience. In April of this year, the developers provided a detailed update on the game's progress, breaking their silence since December of 2023. They've restructured their production workflows to improve efficiency and quality, though this led to the tough decision to delay the third playable faction until after launch. The team is confident that this move ensures better balance and polish for the launch content. Feedback from the demo also prompted a complete overhaul of the navigation and movement systems, making gameplay smoother and more intuitive. UI improvements are also underway to enhance readability and usability, with more updates on the horizon. A significant focus has been placed on refining the campaign, optimizing level design, and improving enemy AI to create missions that are engaging, visually stunning, and true to the spirit of an RTS. While no release date has been confirmed, the developers hinted that it's approaching and plan to announce it soon. Meanwhile, they're preparing to remove the outdated demo from Steam as it no longer reflects the game's current quality. Fans can expect beta tests, gameplay showcases, and deep dives into mechanics like combat loadout and doctrines in the coming months, however. Though the single-player campaign is the primary focus, the team has also big plans for multiplayer. They aim to expand the specialist system, allowing players to recruit unique characters in both modes, deepening the narrative and strategic options. Post-launch, they'll continue to refine multiplayer with updates, balance changes, and new features, ensuring a competitive and engaging experience. Final thoughts. To me, Tempest Rising looks really good, if I'm honest. From all the footage I've seen, it does feel like it captures the essence of games like the Red Alert series, but with much better graphics, obviously. And there's a lot of aspects about the game that just screams Command & Conquer when you look at it. At the same time, it does enough to carve out its own identity so it doesn't come across as just another Command & Conquer clone, while still nailing that familiar vibe. I'm also interested in learning more about the faction-exclusive special units and curious to see what the third faction, the Veti, brings to the table. The game has had its share of delays over the years, with its release window seeming to slip further each time. Still, it's clear that the developers are staying connected with the community. Earlier this year, they launched a playable demo and followed it up with a closed network test in November. And while there's no official release date yet, the closed beta's recent conclusion suggests things might finally be coming together. So that wraps up our video on Tempest Rising. What do you guys make of it from seeing it? Doesn't it give you that classic RTS Command & Conquer vibe that I feel like we've just been missing for a really long time? I love the visuals of the game. I love RTSs in general, even though we don't see too many of them anymore. I want to know what you guys think. Did you play the demo? Are you looking forward to this one? Let me know in the comments below.